Hello and welcome to New Frontiers on CCTV International. I'm Ji Xiajun in Beijing. Today we are taking you to the famous Mogao Grottos in Dunhuang. Historically, Dunhuang was a major stopping point on the Silk Road. Its strategic location made it a melting pot of cultures and religions. Well, the Mogao Grottos contain some of the finest examples of ancient Buddhist art. Local legend has it that back in the year 366 AD, a monk by the name of Yue Zun had a vision of 1,000 Buddhas. This apparently gave him the idea of digging a cave and filling it with images of the Buddha. Evidently, his idea caught on because over the following 1,000 years, many more caves were dug.
In October 2007, technicians from the Gansu Provincial Survey Bureau carried out a field analysis at Mingsha Mountain west of the Mogao Grottos. It was only the second such survey. An earlier one had been carried out in the 1980s. To the east of the grottos, around 25 kilometers southeast of Dunhuang city, is Sanwei Mountain, which is made up of hard rock. Mingsha Mountain, 1 kilometer west of Dunhuang, however, is quite different. This mountain, which is just a dozen or so meters high, is largely made up of flowing sand, because it is born of the desert. The first cave of the Mogao Grottos was formed by monk Yuezun in the year AD 366, and over the following 1,600 years, more and more caves were formed in the mountain to create the network of caves we see today. So far, 735 caves have been found, and within them are no less than 45,000 frescoes and more than 2,000 statues. And this makes Mogao the world's largest site of Buddhist stone grottos. But the fact that the grottos ended up being so large meant that future generations would be presented with a huge challenge, namely, how to preserve this art museum painted on walls. Sandstorms have taken a severe toll on the grottos over the 1,600 years since the first cave was hollowed out of the mountainside. The grottos were formed out of a cliff face, but unfortunately, around the top of the cliff are numerous sand dunes. The site is very close to Mingsha Mountain, which, although just a dozen or so meters high, stretches for 40 or 50 kilometers in a continuous line through the Gobi Desert. Sandstorms have never left the grottos in peace. In fact, even in ancient times, the damage caused by sand erosion left admirers of the grottos in despair. In the 1960s, scientists discovered that winds on Mingsha Mountain reach on average 4 meters per second, and these winds come from 3 directions: west, northwest, and southwest. Whenever there's a wind, sand from Mingsha Mountain is swept across the ground, and as it moves along, it picks up speed before falling with force down the cliff face. Year in and year out, sand has accumulated at the foot of the cliff, half burying the caves at the lower levels. For many years, Dunhuang Academy removed on average between 3,000 and 4,000 cubic meters of sand, but even this amount proved far from enough, because none of the caves had windows or doors for protection. The worst effects were caused by the wind coming from the southwest, which lifted the sand into the sky to form sand funnels, and then blasted the sand into the caves, damaging everything inside.
不了解人觉得那沙子嘛，有点点沙怕什么，非常厉害。我们这因为也多风啊，有一次我见过一次，就是春天刮风，一个汽车啊，走过一个风口，走不过来了，就停下。 一个晚上，那个汽车上的漆全给打没了，所以这个沙是很厉害的，所以它会上层洞窟变薄，甚至塌陷。然后呢是崖体风化，然后是壁画、彩塑的模式，所以应该说非常漂亮的画，弄得模模糊糊，甚至打坏了。
Along with sand, the wind delivers another destructive weapon, very fine dust. Every edge of each tiny dust particle is sharp. After this dust finds its way into a cave, it not only cuts the surface of the frescoes and statues, but also makes its way into the seams that divide the painted sections. Inevitably, cracks appear. Once the dust particles have accumulated to a certain level, the paint, the white base underneath, and even the surface of the wall begin to disintegrate. But the damage doesn't end here. The ever-increasing weight of the sand on the roof of a cave causes water to accumulate on the roof. At the same time, the sand prevents water from evaporating from the caves at the lower levels. As a result, the frescoes and statues inside the caves suffer from mildew and become soft and alkalized. As for the frescoes outside the caves, the situation is even worse. As they lack any protection whatsoever, many have lost their original appearance due to more than 1,000 years of erosion. Over the years, Dunhuang Academy has employed a variety of methods in an attempt to save these particularly vulnerable frescoes. But then in 1987, shortly after the Mogao Graoto site was included in the UNESCO World Cultural Heritage List, there was more bad news. Sand from Mingsha Mountain was moving toward the grottos at a speed of 10 meters per year, and before long, the grottos would be completely engulfed by the mountain of sand. Was this just a theoretical supposition, or was it a prediction of the inevitable? In the 1980s, scientists from the Desert Institute of the Chinese Academy of Sciences provided technical support for research into the exact direction in which the sand of Mingsha Mountain was moving.
当时呢，参谋所的有关科研人员呢，找到我们局，找到我们航测有关人员，了解我们局里面馆藏的一些摄影资料。我们从我们的馆藏里面发现，在莫高窟区域60年代有一起航空摄影，80年代中后期有一起航空摄影，所以就引起了第一次我们这种合作。其实最早还是跟中科院进行的一种合作。这次合作的时候呢，我们采用60年代的航空摄影相片，和80年代的航空摄影相片进行控制测量，所采用的点也是同样的点。这样的话进行一种定位，对莫高窟窟顶，整个沙丘的。 这个它主要是金字塔沙丘，还有新月城沙丘，整个的沙丘这一块呢进行一个量测。
Well, the sand from the Mingsha Mountain contains its relentless march towards the Mogao Grottos. The scientists were confronted with the real possibility that the grottos would be completely engulfed.
In 2002, the Gansu Provincial Survey Bureau set up 24 permanent observation stations around Mingsha Mountain so that comprehensive surveys could be conducted twice a year. These stations would monitor any shift in the movement of the mountain of sand. Movement of the sand mountain is of course caused by wind, and after years of surveying and monitoring, scientists have finally been able to acquire all the knowledge they need concerning the local wind conditions. As the grottos are in a desert, most of the damage they suffer is caused by sand blown at them from Mingsha Mountain, and it is the winds from the south, west and east that are the most destructive. The researchers have discovered that wind speeds of 5 meters per second or less do not lift sand or dust particles. When the wind speed reaches 5 to 8 meters per second, however, dust and sand are lifted into the air, and when the speed exceeds 8 meters per second, dust and sand are carried into the distance. Of all the winds experienced in the course of a year, it is the wind from the southwest that reaches the fastest speed. Although the southwesterly winds account for just 5.6% of all the winds in the area, they often reach speeds well above 8 meters per second. And it is this wind that carries so much sand, around 3,000 cubic meters per year. The east winds, on the other hand, offset the adverse effects of the westerly winds by transporting sand and dust in the opposite direction. After years of study and after comparing photos taken during the 1960s and 1980s, scientists are now able to provide accurate data about how fast Mingsha Mountain is moving.
通过我们2期大比例尺航片的这种，对莫高窟区域的这个地形图测绘的这种研究，沙漠研究人员呢结合莫高窟周围的这个气象资料以及分洞实验，对这个莫高窟窟顶的这个沙丘运动的这个机理呢研究呢形成了一定的结论。他得到了一个说，在近1000年内莫高窟是不可能被我们被这个沙漠淹没的这一个结论。
The finding was a great relief, and it was a result made possible by years of hard work spent surveying the area around the grottos, establishing non-stop surveillance of the site, and conducting research on Mingsha Mountain. However, as good as this news was, the scientists knew they could not relax. In 1988, a year after the grottos were included in UNESCO's list of World Cultural Heritage Sites, the UNESCO committee carried out a field investigation of its own in Dunhuang. Afterwards, the committee suggested that the Getty Foundation, based in the United States, become involved in the protection work. Along the route taken by the most destructive wind, apart from the A-shaped screen in the forest belt, Dunhuang Academy went further by establishing a gravel belt and numerous square shrubberies to enforce the defensive works set up to hold back the encroaching sand. After the 1980s, Dunhuang Academy introduced a new material into the defense network, a very strong nylon product able to withstand both high and extremely low temperatures, strong radiation from the sun, and fierce winds. With this new material, they set up an A-shaped nylon shield, 1.8 meters tall and 1,024 meters long in the northern part of the site and 800 meters long in the southern part. This shield, which creates a protected zone, extends all the way up to the top of Mingsha Mountain. Inside the protected zone, the key area is the southern one, as most of the frescoes and statues are in this area. Everything about the nylon shield, its angle, length and height, was calculated to provide the maximum protection to the southern part of the zone. The nylon shield is multifunctional, as it prevents entry of sand carried by the westerly wind and changes the direction of the southerly and easterly winds. When wind hits the shield, the sand carried by the wind falls to the ground in front of the shield. According to calculations, every year this shield stops 75% of the sand carried by the wind. Dunhuang Academy also established a special biozone. Experiments had proved that in the Gobi Desert, a red willow can retain around its base some 15 cubic meters of sand. Due to the extreme aridity of the area in which the Mogao Grottos are located and the extreme lack of rainfall, Dunhuang Academy planned to set up a biozone at the foot of Mingsha Mountain on the west side of the nylon shield. 5 sand-resistant plant species were selected, and to ensure that the plants would survive, a special drip-feed irrigation system was installed. Fortunately, the biozone is highly effective. Because of it, wind speeds have been reduced by 50%, and the amount of sand delivered by 95%. But the scientists knew that this was just a beginning, as there is still a long way to go to bring the sand completely under control. Successfully achieving this goal would require continuous innovation and experimentation. In 2002, Dunhuang Academy, drawing on experience gained in establishing sand control measures along the Ningxia Railway, planted more than 50 acres of squares in wheat and cotton west of the forest belt, closer to Mingsha Mountain. This was done to reduce even further the wind speed and quantity of sand delivered. Scientists working on the project had discovered that when the wind speed reaches 11 meters per second, a large quantity of sand on Mingsha Mountain becomes airborne and is then delivered to the foot of the nylon shield. This sand remains a threat to the grottos. Dunhuang Academy used gravel obtained locally to construct another belt, one able to cover the source of the sand and thus prevent the sand from moving. In this way, sand accumulation is avoided.
Using a variety of approaches, Dunhuang Academy has succeeded in building up a fairly comprehensive anti-sand defense system. At the same time, it has also been putting a great deal of effort into another urgent task, that of protecting and renovating the damaged frescoes.
高窟的病害啊，我们在50年代就进行个调查。那个时候，敦煌研究院的人不多，只有40几个人是全部出动。我们经过这个1年多的调查，最后给他确定了6种病害，一种是壁画起家，一种是速结，一种是大面积脱落，一种是烟熏，一种是发霉，一种是斑点性的起家病害。 大概定了这么6种，后来我们有发展，可能还定的稍微多一些。说的这个起家、大面积脱落、空骨就大面积脱落，再一个这个速结，这3种病害是对文物的这个壁画病害是危害最大的。
Of all the types of damage, hollows and cracks on the walls are the biggest problems. If unchecked, hollows and cracks cause a fresco to fall away from the wall completely. Onychosis is another problem. A fresco suffering from this condition can be compared to a person suffering from a very serious skin disease. Just a light touch of a finger causes the fresco to fall away. Both preservation and renovation of damaged paintings depend on accurate data acquired through surveys. Only a thorough examination of a fresco can determine whether it will be even possible to restore it to its original appearance.
我们现在呢就认识到了，这个是任何工作，不是光说研究保护，就是我们做别的工作，首先也是要把基础做好。所以后来我们认识到了，就是首先要去搞测绘。你比如像莫高窟那个崖壁，要测。 现在的手段多得很，你就遥感，那么3维激光，什么近景摄影测量都可以，最好是整个莫高窟的几百个洞，都做成一个报告。这个报告里头的有几个手段，一个就是测绘，一个就是照相、摄影啊，一个就是文字记载，把这3个结合起来，客观的、准确的。 用这几个手段把它记载下来。
In October 2003, Dunhuang Academy and the Gansu Provincial Survey Bureau carried out another survey, one that concentrated on the exact size of and situation in each cave, as well as the size and condition of each fresco and to what extent it had been damaged. By the end of the survey, detailed records of each cave and every single fresco had been acquired. The Gansu Provincial Survey Bureau used close-range photography to survey the cliff and the surrounding area. The purpose was to acquire environmental information for the preservation and renovation work. The 2003 survey resulted in detailed information, including a precise topographic map of a 3-kilometre area around the grottos and data for a high-definition 3D image of the cliff. With this data, scientists were able to build up an archive that could be consulted when formulating strategies to combat erosion improve damage control measures, and restore damaged areas. Ever since the founding of the People's Republic of China, efforts to prevent damage to the Mogao Grottos never ceased. But the most difficult task for scientists was working out exactly how the damage was being caused. Since the year AD 386, the grottos have been exposed to all kinds of destructive natural forces: wind, sand, dust, rainfall, and earthquakes. And on top of these, there have been the inevitable effects of aging. The location of the grottos has also contributed to the damage. The grottos were built on a cliff made up largely of loose gravel. In recent years, scientists have identified two new culprits: water and salt. Although there is little rainfall in the area around Mogao, beneath the desert, between layers of rock, a small but very complicated water system does exist. The hard water, characteristic of this area, creeps along tiny crevices, dissolves various substances in the rock, and then transports these substances anywhere it can. It is this mechanism that has caused the frescoes to suffer from onychosis and caused parts of the walls to fall away. Another negative factor is the damage caused by the increasing number of tourists. The carbon dioxide exhaled by the visitors increases the damage. The Mogao Grottos were first opened to the public in 1979, and since then, more than 4 million tourists have visited the site. Scientists have carried out a comparison study between a cave open to tourists and one that is not. 40 people inside a cave for half an hour results in 5 times more carbon dioxide, a 10% increase in humidity, and a temperature rise of 4 degrees centigrade. To control the damage caused to the grottos as a result of tourist activities, in the 1980s, Dunhuang Academy began installing a number of sensors in each cave to provide 24-hour monitoring of light, temperature, humidity, and airflow. Dunhuang Academy has a large say in determining the number of tourists permitted to enter the caves. Visitors are allowed to enter 60 caves, but to see them all, they must take 12 separate routes. In this way, the number of tourists visiting any one cave at any one time is greatly lessened, and potential damage due to overcrowding avoided. While measures aimed at minimizing the damage to the frescoes have resulted in steady progress, when it comes to the renovation of damaged paintings, much more time is required. Restoration work on the frescoes began in the 1950s, and it has continued for half a century. Restoration is like surgery, and it is no less demanding. The restoration of a painting involves removing dust, injecting into it a special emulsion, removing air from crevices, and placing pressure on the surface of the fresco to cause the layers beneath to consolidate. So far, more than 3,000 square meters of seriously damaged frescoes and 100 or more statues have been restored to their original appearance. As well as using traditional approaches in this preservation work, Dunhuang Academy also makes use of the latest digital technology. From 2005 to the present, Dunhuang Academy has completed 3D animation filming of no less than 40 caves.
The Taoist monk Wang Yuanlu, who discovered the Mogao Grottos back in 1900, brought disaster to them. In the course of several decades, Western explorers flocked to the area and priceless treasures in their thousands were removed from the grottos. Today, many of these works are still on display at museums in the West. Fortunately, in the 1950s, a concerted effort was launched to protect the Mogao Grottos, employing the latest technology. This effort was recognized in 1987 when the Mogao Grottos were listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Thank you for staying with us on today's New Frontiers. I'm Ji Xiaojun from CCTV International. Bye for now.